Previously on Escape to DOS. Back in July 2023, I made a video called Making Music and More, because 2 years prior to that, I had watched Necroware's video about CMS chips on the Sound Blaster 2. So basically, it took me 4 years to finally get this right. This is the card that I bought in July of 2021, and I tested it with Monkey Island, and I put it on the shelf. And then I finally made that video where I programmed the gal chip, discovered this terrible noise. I looked on the card for obvious signs. I found this leaking capacitor. So I panicked and I decided to replace all the capacitors like a goof. And I hoped for the best, so I decided to install the CMS chips and that gal chip. And after I installed the Sound Blaster 2 software, the noise was still there. It's cranked all the way to the top. And then this. No. And I checked the low DMA channel and I get error low DMA channel setting. In that video, I discovered that there was excessive noise. There was this low DMA channel error that I kept getting. And for me, the most troubling part was the Midi input failure, because that's the only way I was going to make music with the thing, short of having to type it all in, and that's what I had to do. Hopefully, with maybe somebody's help out there, I can diagnose what's wrong with this thing. I got some incredible comments, some wonderful advice, and a couple of weeks ago, these last two comments are the ones that really put the fire under me to do this, which led me to finally solving the problem.
With a little help from my friends.
This is where I'm at. I think it might be this CT1350 chip. I stumbled across somebody mentioning something about the 74LS245 chip. Maybe that's why the signal's not getting to the 1336 chip. Total shot in the dark, and I was completely wrong. And I know this must be painful for people that understand this much better than me, but I didn't even know where to start with this. And Nick obviously did. That chip carries address lines. It's got nothing to do with my problem. First, I needed to find out which pins are carrying the DMA signals. I went to allpinouts.org. I found the diagram and the information for the 8-bit cards. And on the B side of the card, what corresponds to my card is B17 and B18. And on the Sound Blaster 2, that's all you get. You get DMA request and DMA acknowledge. So it makes it pretty simple. There's only 2 pins to worry about. So I looked at the card again. I checked the traces. They seem to be going to the other side of the card where this 74LS chip is. So maybe I'll just pull that chip. I'll put a socket in there, and just before I made that stupid choice, I got a comment from Bits und Bolts. And he said, check the voltage regulator before you do anything. And I did that, and it's fine. And it gave me a moment to think. Nick's advice was to check the signal path and see if it was being interrupted by something. I looked at the traces under the microscope, everything looked fine, so I set my multimeter to continuity test, and with the black lead underneath the card attached to B17, I discovered that there is a direct connection going straight to pin 33 on that CT1336 chip, which I suspected from the beginning. But before I would commit to removing it, I needed some proper evidence. And this was what sealed the deal. This is the DMA request line, and it goes directly to pin 32 on that chip. But in my head, I heard Alex saying sometimes the solution is so simple that it's easily overlooked. So before I committed to removing that chip and, potentially damaging the card, just like the Voodoo card, I decided to have a look at the legs. And I found a bit of movement on that one. Maybe it's just a matter of the legs not being soldered properly. Now, it's not pin 32 or 33 that were loose, but, maybe it's output from the chip that's causing the problem. To me, it makes no sense that the CT1336 chip would fail. It's a solid-state part. It doesn't have electrolyte in it. It's not made of fruit or cheese. It's got a shelf life longer than 30 years, I would imagine. I can only speculate that somehow it got more voltage than it's supposed to receive. Like maybe the machine that it was in, the power supply failed and somehow selectively sent 12 volts down the DMA channel. And only the DMA channel because pretty much everything else works on the card. Even if this doesn't make a difference reflowing all the legs. At least it'll make it easier if I have to remove the chip. Here it is again, the moment of truth. I've reflowed all those problematic solder joints. I sprayed that ISA slot. I cleaned the card connectors. There's really no reason why this shouldn't work, provided those solder joints were a problem. Now, the first thing I notice is that the noise has been greatly reduced. Installing the Sound Blaster 2.0 software. Now, because I had noticed this reduction in the noise coming out of the card, I thought, well, hey, maybe I'm on the road to success. Maybe bits and bolts is right. Maybe it is just something simple. Just like the Voodoo 2 card, all I needed to do was inspect it with the microscope. But then I noticed this noise again. That's what you want. I think I hadn't turned the volume all the way up when I first booted the machine up with the card in it. But it is quieter. But yep. Well, that didn't fix the problem. So I immediately go to the Sound Blaster Diagnostic utility, where I know I'm going to see that red box again telling me that low DMA is not working. Just as before, the base address works fine. IRQ works just fine. Was reflowing it a waste of time? Yep. Still a problem. Reflowing it didn't make any difference. Do I need to remove that chip? For the last 2 years, I've been thinking about this. Right after I made that video, I bought these sockets because I assumed I was going to remove those 74LS chips, as well as the CT1350 chip, all 68 legs of that thing. This is what the socket looked like on the ad, and when I received it, this is what I got. I discussed it with Nick in the comments that I was considering socketing that 1336 chip, to which he replied, "They can be problematic when you're using harvested chips." But I still couldn't figure out how I was going to solder that thing in because of all those little plastic bars in the way. And that I did. Out it came. It took a while. It's unnerving to remove a chip that size with hot air. And of course I forgot to turn the camera on. What I haven't mentioned so far is that I have another one of those CT1336 chips. And that is in that bad Sound Blaster Pro card that I have. Back when I didn't know the difference between untested and it's probably junk, I mistakenly bought this card thinking it was fully functional to find out that it was untested, and fortunately the seller refunded me probably about 3/4 of the money I spent on it. And over the last 4 years I've made countless attempts trying to fix this thing. I completely recapped it. I used one of those infrared thermometers to see if I could find a hot chip on the thing. I checked the voltage regulator, and eventually I just came to the conclusion that I need more information and I don't know how to fix it. These are the corners that I was most concerned about, trying to get the soldering iron in there without melting all the plastic at the same time. This is the TSC1 tip, and it works perfectly for this application. I usually find that it doesn't have enough heat, but these pins and soldering them down to those pads, it's just the absolute perfect right amount. This is the original chip that I cleaned up and I put back into the socket. Let's see if it works. Already it's making some terrible noises. And when it does the memory count, get that same grinding sound. I'm at least expecting to get exactly the same bad performance out of this chip. I do have that slight concern that the amount of heat that I had to apply to the chip to get it off the board could potentially have damaged it, so that's got me concerned. That's a lot of noise. And it is making more noise than it did last time, and that's got me nervous. Maybe I have damaged the chip. And that's really not good because I've already removed the other chip from the bad Sound Blaster Pro, and I sure don't have any brand new chips to try. So the first thing I test, of course, is the base I/O address, and there's a brand new error with this card. But before I decided to mourn the loss of that chip, I considered what Nick had told me, and I decided to give that chip a proper cleaning. I removed the solder again, and then I sprayed it, and I gave it a light sanding. And this time, when I went to the Diagnostic utility, and a bit of a twist, this was the first time I was happy to see that red box. At least now I know it's working exactly as it did before. The socket works. It's time to put the new chip in. And it's by no means new, and the other problem too is I don't know if the chip works, because I could never get that Sound Blaster Pro card to even get recognized. Time to insert the chip and give it a go. See if it works. Ever since July 2021, I've had this card. It never worked right. I had no idea how to fix it. And thanks to some kind folks who left some comments for me, I was able to see this happen for the very first time. And the sound is on. It no longer makes all that extra noise. And this is the moment of truth. Did I waste my time? No. Look at that. It works. It finally works.
Holy shit.
I tested it with the Diagnostic utility, of course. Okay, what do we get? There it is. Finally. And that was loud. That was really loud. I had the speakers turned up all the way trying to hear any of the noise that it was going to produce. 8-bit testing works. FM synthesized music. Whoa! Just as loud, just as surprising. I've never heard that song come out of this computer before because I've never gotten this far with the card. Which is leading me to believe that this thing is fully fixed. There's only one more thing on my list. The noise is gone, the DMA failure clearly is gone, but does the MIDI input work? Time to break out the MIDI controller, attach the MIDI adapter to the game port on the back of this sound card, and hook up the MIDI cable and see if I get any MIDI input. My previous attempt, when I tried to load up Sequencer Plus, it said that there was no MIDI interface, so sorry, I can't help you. This time it sees a MIDI interface and all the software is loaded. This is the first test. And it works, so next I need to connect my MIDI controller keyboard into it. This is with the Opal 2 chip. So I finally did it. With some help from some friends, the card finally functions like it's supposed to. So let's upgrade it just like I meant to do 2 years ago. In goes the Philips SAA1099 chips. Next goes in the GAL chip that Neckerware figured out. And then I change that jumper so it enables CMS. Every song that you've heard so far, I composed with this card. I can't be any happier about the way this worked out. Big thanks to everyone who left comments and inspired me to try this again. I'm going to leave you with the intro song, and thank you so much, everyone.
Suffer and succotash.